curious, you were covering Miami. I mean, can you just talk about that more? I mean, how do the cops treat you? What do you say?
Well, what's very interesting, because we have, you know, Occupy Miami was not as big as Occupy LA, and I've been covering it for months. And when they finally evicted them, the Miami-Dade Police Department, there was two, there was the city of Miami and the county, the Miami-Dade. It was on County Hall, but it was inside Miami city limits, so they had two agencies there. And they basically, what they did was, they go, okay, everyone with the media, go here. And all the corporate journalists went over there. Some were wearing little army helmets that were apparently handed out by the cops. And I didn't go, you know. I said, well, I'm not gonna go over there because there were 6 activists who had linked arms within their little encampment. And they put themselves behind these barricades. And they're like, we're not going, we're going to jail. And I said, well, you know, these guys are going down for the cause. I'm gonna be here with my cameras to make sure when they do get arrested, they get arrested non-violently. And so then the cops came in with a riot gear and they're pushing everybody out. And they, you know, I finally got pushed out, and I was on the sidewalk, and they were just pushing everybody down the streets. And finally, they dispersed everybody. And they finally said, "Okay, if you don't leave now, we're going to arrest you." And everybody left except the journalists. And I stayed because I looked at them. I'm going to take my cue from the other journalists. And well, they're there. I'm going to be here. And it was done. So I was walking back to my car. I was still shooting that video. And as I was walking back, I was arrested by the PIO. Put it that way. You're not going to meet a reporter who's been arrested by a PIO.
I didn't know they even could make arrests.
Yeah, Major Nancy Perez. And she's the head of the PIO department. And she apparently did not like me because I wasn't part of the corporate media, where I was allowing her to lead the media around here, you know, just doing my thing. None of the other cops had an issue with me. And then she had me arrested, and I spent the night in jail. And when I got out, they deleted my footage, which I recovered. And I had this blog called Photography Instead of Crime. So I'm like the last person who want to do that to. You know, this is what I write about. And so now we're going to trial, and they're withholding evidence. And, you know, it's a big deal. And she's a PIO. And it's really, I don't know what got into her. She's got 25 years of professional experience behind her, and she just snapped. But she's not very familiar with new media. You know, my background is mainstream media, but I'm an independent journalist now. So I gotta know how it is on both sides. And she's like, we dealt with her. And she said, well, you know, the blogs, isn't that what the kids run nowadays? You know, I blog, and my blog is not kids play. You know, my blog is through public records requests, through emails, we determined, we proved that they knew who I was. Because she told my lawyer to death, oh, I didn't know who you were. I thought he was just an activist. But then she received an email from their Homeland Security that said, Carlos Miller's going to be there covering it. He said on Facebook, you know, I'm very open about it. I'm going to be covering the eviction. And so, yeah, be sure. And they put my little picture from Facebook there. And, you know, I'm flashing peace signs, so, you know, like a terrorist. And I was arrested. Wow. And so they knew who I was, and they singled me out. Because all the other journalists were around there, and they're like, nothing. They're just walking around. And she goes, well, we told you to disperse. And I go, well, what about these guys? Because, oh, they're allowed to be here. Because they're part of corporate media. And we don't have, they used to have these press passes they would give out in the Miami-Dade Police Department. But they did away with that a few years ago because they were being abused. So now there's no way that they can determine who the journalists and who's not.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is really fascinating. And I'd like to hear more about people who cover protests, how you get around that whole press credential issue. As someone who teaches and researches crime in the media, kind of what we talked about yesterday, since the Rodney King videotape, any major reform or question about police procedures have been the result not of credentialed press footage, but citizen journalists, social media, things of that nature. One of the videos I show in my civil disobedience class is This Is What Democracy Looks Like, which is that terrific video of the WTO protests. And you see, and it's the entire video, an hour and a half, is from the Independent Media Center, which was something brand new at the time. And time and again, you see the cops asking people for their press credentials, and if they didn't have press credentials, they were either arrested or taken off camera, and who the heck knows what happened. And I think that that's really important because, quite frankly, the story that night, you know, when the encampment was being taken down, wasn't the encampment being taken down, it was what were police going to be doing. that was really the question. How were they going to handle it? Particularly, you know, I believe Oakland was first, right?
Yeah.
So particularly in the aftermath of what was happening in Oakland, and it does create that tension between, you know, getting the close-up view of what was happening and being kind of corralled and managed as you know, credentialed press. And so I'm curious.
Well, I made my own.
And maybe it brings up the whole question of, you know, they often ask, who do you represent, right? Well, if you're a citizen journalist, it's everybody. It's not the LA Times, it's not the OC Register.
Well, like a press pass, you know, we're not talking about the ones that cops issue out. The ones, if you work for the LA Times, press pass is nothing but a pass that identifies your employer. I made my own when I went to Tampa with the RNC. Basically, my blog, I have my name, you know, my real picture. There's no lies there. And, you know, they look at that. They want some cops, you know, they want something that looks official. They have no idea what what press pass really means. They just shows them, okay, you're a journalist. And that's it. And that, you know, actually, I found that they treat me better when they see that. But, you know, the law says you don't need a press pass.
Well, in New York, it wouldn't. They just want to see the New York one or you're
Right.
screwed.
Right.
I had my press pass taken away from me by the San Diego County Sheriff 3 years ago. And, I mean, blatantly a political decision. I got pepper sprayed at a police line. They knew who I was. They knew what was going down. And I can't even get a press pass. But if I want to go to a police line, I have to have one. So I just show up and I do my thing. And, you know, there's that little bit of, you know, controversy between us. But I mean, I don't even know. I mean, I got it when I was in the Port of Long Beach. I got a press pass from like a writers union in New York, and it's actually been expired now. But I had it on, and I was behind the skirmish lines, you know, documenting what the police were doing. And one of the police, the PIO, came up to me, he looked at my press pass, and he goes, "Oh well, I guess that's good enough. I'll let you stay here."
So it's interesting because that same protest I was at too. Like I actually watched like some Occupy protesters use the press. I mean, like there was this woman Ruth who has written like more like entertainment-y type of stories for The Guardian in the past, like maybe a couple years ago. But so was like using that line, I'm a journalist for The Guardian, which wasn't like entirely accurate. I mean, so I don't know, it's just like, it's really complicated. And the question then becomes, I mean, like that night, their goal was to move people out of that area. And so, and that included everybody. And so I think, yeah, I don't know, it's complicated.
Just to give a sense of what it was like covering Occupy for me on like a super local level. Because our metro area in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois is population 120,000. And the Occupy movement there was actually just this coming together of these disjointed activism groups that already existed. So they came together and they had protests in the park. They never stayed there, they never camped out, but it was just like a series of regular protests. And at no point were police even part of the story. Like, they weren't even there at the protests. And I was laughing when you said you put your notebook away, because that was one of the most hilariously frustrating parts for me covering Occupy. I knew all these people, because I had covered, like I said, they had already existed. They were already activists before Occupy even came about. So I covered all these people, I met with them. And then I'd go up to them at an Occupy protest, and I'd say, hey, can I ask you a few questions? They say, no, you're part of the mainstream media, we don't want to keep you out of this. I'd be like, Brian, I had coffee with you last week. And then it was really awkward because they had this one march down, like through our downtown, and they had planned the march so it would stop at like Chase Bank and all these different places that they were protesting. And then one of the stops was the News Gazette building where I work. And they were just shouting, doing their demonstration thing in the News Gazette building, yelling for our publisher. And then I'd walk up to people and I'd be like, can I ask you a few questions, like why you hate me? So it was very strange for me covering occupied on like when you know everybody and everyone knows everybody, and it's just kind of been going on in your town for a while, and then this Occupy movement comes about, and it's a national trend, so you have to cover it as that. But that's just my experience. I don't know what you can take away from that, but it's just very, very different from what I'm hearing.
I get the distinct feeling that the LA Times gets to decide who's a real journalist. From this conversation, you're dissing the other folks. That's my impression. And I've been in a situation.
What do you mean?
Well, I've been in a situation where, oh, well, this is about me, but I didn't know it was an immigration situation. So we said, all right, we'll say yes. And as soon as we got inside the big corral in Brownsville, we went 5 directions and like, go ahead, control us. I'm like I said, I'm hearing, like I said, I'm hearing you setting yourself apart from other journalists. Like somehow our cause is more noble because we represent.
I don't get that at all.
I don't think she is. I think the police did.
Yeah.
By having.
But I
That's
think you
what I'm
accepted
getting.
the role. That's a big accusative
No.
role. I get the feeling you accepted that role as opposed to saying, wow, you know, I'm not going to go along with this conspiracy.
I mean, I
Katie.
think it was a judgment call. I didn't view it as a conspiracy at the time. I mean, I viewed it as like an attempt to, yeah, it was an attempt to like rein in, you know, to control that night, to not have chaos with journalists running all around, and of course to control their message. But like that's the LAPD every day, you know. So like this, I don't think, I mean, and I get, and it was a decision, but it was also we made the decision to be there and to be everywhere else, and you know, I don't know.
Well, I think she said also her editor told her to do it. She had checked with her editor, you know.
Kay, I'm going to come to your defense. My name is Steve Gregory. I'm a journalist with KFI News in Los Angeles. And I was also in the pool.
What's up?
It's been very interesting to sit and listen to everybody, but I have to come to your defense because what Kate left out for whatever reason, but there were 3 pools that night. When we first arrived, I too got the same less than an hour notice to come down to the special pool meeting at LAPD headquarters. And when we arrived, the PIOs, one a commander and one a lieutenant, was very clear that the incident commander did not want anybody covering that. If you recall,
I actually came in just
Okay.
for my
the reason it was done so last minute was because it was the PIO unit that was able to convince the incident commander to allow a pool in the embedded operation, into the tactical area. But the only way they were going to allow it is with a pool. A pool. Well, when we arrived and got on and started going around this thing, and I put my name in the box as well, Frank Stoltz, another colleague of mine from KPCC, the NPR affiliate, he comes over to me and he's like, well, you know, I hope radio doesn't get screwed here. And I said, well, then let's figure something out. So we demanded 5 pools initially because the Occupy movement itself, the encampment was on both sides of City Hall. You had the north end and the south end, and it was it would be a lot of ground to cover for 1 pool. So we were like, we got to do something here, 5 pools. So we had to negotiate back and forth. We came down with 3 pools, each containing 1 from each medium. And the reason that the LAPD credential, just like the LA County Sheriff's credential, is so crucial for us is because we go through background checks through the Department of Justice to get them. We have to submit background checks. That's why the LAPD considers it a government-issued document, because we've already been cleared through security, basically. So they only wanted credential media in the tactical situation, but they allowed everyone else across the street with eyes view per the Crespo decision, which was a federal consent decree from years ago out over the DNC, which says they have to put a staging area together for all media within eyes view of the event. So there was a plan in place, and as Kate said, it was a clusterfuck from the beginning because they had never planned anything of this size and magnitude before. The LAPD never really coordinated. As far as controlling the message, My personal view from it, and having done this for over 30 years, they weren't controlling the message as much as they were trying to control safety for us. They was worried about our safety. I got detained because I got separated from my pool, and I got pulled aside. And look, I'm not easily yanked anywhere, my size. But I got yanked over, and I almost got arrested because I wasn't with a pool. And at one point, a commander inside the tactical area said, "All media out," kicked us all out one time. I don't remember that big announcement. So he said, "Get everyone out." Well, then we were bitching and moaning, but then by that time, media from across the street had run across and got into the fray. So now it was just chaos, utter chaos, everywhere. The pools became useless. But the intent, and like Kate, I took my job very seriously as a pool reporter because I knew my colleagues were waiting for the audio tape to bring them across the street and everything I could do for them. I took that very seriously. But there was no conspiracy on the part of the LAPD. There wasn't. And I mean, they tried their best. The media relations unit tried their best to get us in there. I was upset because the problem was the media relations unit did not communicate with the ground commanders. That was the problem. So the media relations unit had all these grandiose plans for the media, but what happened inside is that the commanders on the ground didn't even know, and then there was no way to distinguish us from anybody else other than our little tiny credentials, which are still from the 50s and 60s. They haven't upgraded and updated their credentials, so no one knows. And everyone claiming to be a reporter at one point, cops had to throw their hands up. So it was sorry, I had to finally jump in.
That's one thing you did tell them to go take a jump, and everybody just went in and covered it.
Pardon me?
So finally, the whole thing fell apart, and you just did your job.
Okay.
Well, it eventually did that, but the initial plan was because they had to control the safety. It was a safety
And
issue.
when they were
So-
making the majority of the arrests, when they had like contained it, then I think it was only 4 people who were in there, right?
Pardon?
At the very end, by the time they had gotten most people and the people who were there to get arrested, like.
Then it went back to the pool.
Then
Yeah,
it-
then they kicked everyone out and all of the other French media or the outside media.
Yeah.
And they kicked them out and then brought all the credentials and get back in to observe the
Or only the
The-
pool.
right credential folks. Yeah.
Fringe media.
Like,
Okay.
I think this is a good example of why a lot of the live streamers and citizen journalists think that the current model needs to die, is because, like, you're presenting, I think, very reasonable, from your perspective, explanations, and you're, keeping in mind the tactical considerations, etc. But the net effect of this is that there are, tens of thousands of people who want to see what's going on with this, and you've only got 10 sets of eyes there. And I think like 100 Carlos Millers would have, and you would have ended up with more pictures of what happened and more stories of what happened than the alternative. And so I think,
well, maybe the like credentialing needs to evolve then, because there are some people like cross-sex bones who really like pledge no allegiance, and like yes, he's at Occupy all the time, and like I have no idea, but like he's different than this woman Ruth, who was a protester who wanted a reason to stay. I mean, so it's just sort of like what those credentials mean to me is not just a background check, but is also this idea that we all believe in as journalists, that we are like seeking some objectivity, and that like we are there to report what we see, and not with. So it's just.
But you can't have a government agency decide who is a reporter, who is not a reporter.
No, I know,
Because
I
then
know.
we're like in Cuba.
I'm not saying, maybe it's.
No, I
That's
wanted
the great
to
kind
say
of thing,
something
something
too,
like
that when you're like a regular reporter, you kind of have to have a relationship. That's part of the credentialing. I mean, you got to work with them when there's no Occupy. I mean, there's not always going to be Occupy. And, kids got to go back there, after Occupy has done its part, and talk to them about other stuff that doesn't have anything to do with Occupy. And, it's a relationship, and a relationship can't always be combative. And
I disagree completely. I mean, I think ideally it shouldn't be.
it should
But
be.
it's your choice if you want to write negative stuff all the time.
No,
You should
but
have the right to
they
that.
do. They do write, negative coverage of that.
The
LAPD all the
extreme
time.
is New York City. They didn't even care. I mean, actually, Norman Siegel said if I go through the process again, he'll represent me for free. I couldn't get credentialed. I've been embedded in the military for 5 months and doing positive stories about police in New Orleans. And I went through the whole thing. Now, I basically was ready to be credentialed. And they looked at my Louisiana driver's license and they made up a new law. No out of state. You're not from New York, you know, and you can't get it. And I had no recourse. I had no recourse.
I can't talk about other states.
Yeah, but I mean,
But at
that's
the same time,
whole
it's not-
thing. When you
I feel
accept
like-
justice somewhere, just man, the power abuse within the
I feel
whole
like
system is so out
Kate
of
is being
control.
blamed for that kind of construct, and it's really not her fault, or the LA Times
No,
fault.
You know what, I think in California, we have a First Amendment coalition, and this is really a free press issue, it's also a legal issue. And I think it would be best for, not this forum, but we need Society of Professional Journalists, we need the First Amendment coalition, we need advocacy groups, maybe the ACLU, to bring a test case, maybe it'll be Carlos, maybe it'll be Julie, on credentialing of press, what is a reporter, who should be allowed inside the line, who should be allowed not inside the line.
Yeah, it's a bigger
Well, my
issue
case
than
coming up.
social
You really
media.
need a constitutional
In
test
my case
case.
coming up, we did a lot of public records requests. We obtained conversations from the state attorney's office to the PIO who arrested me as to how they're going to prepare for my trial. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to say, well, he wasn't there as a journalist. These are the credentialed journalists, and they have these pictures with the guys in their little helmets, and they have a picture of me with my camera, you know, and so I'm an activist according to them. Because
I'm saying just as like, you know, we're moving from old media to new media, you know, which we are, now this opens up the question of like, who is a journalist and which journalist should the government recognize? If it's an issue, if we're saying that anyone can be a journalist, it'll probably need a test case before the courts.
Yeah.
And it may even have to go to the U.S. Supreme Court, you know, on who can cover demonstrations. And, you know,
who's
it's
willing
assert
to
your
take it
right.
back?
But
So it
there's
isn't
no
like
law right now that says
necessary
you're
to
not
love.
allowed.
Money to take it back.
I mean, we shouldn't pick on
Because it's
mainstream
money, right?
media right now, but mainstream media should be your ally to encompass everyone within this pool of
Yeah, I mean, I would hope our legal representative would argue that anyone can be a journalist.
Yes.
If,
Yeah.
I mean, because, I mean, that's what we're, with social media, everyone is a journalist. Some are more objective, some are partisan, some are, but I mean, they're all, I mean, each person who takes to any of these forums, online or offline or whatever.
Martin, that's you, representative.
But yeah.
Yeah. Some are less objective. Yeah, sorry.
Some of the criticism seems to be more like you're guilty because you drank the Kool-Aid and went along. Now, in Oakland, I had friends who, the police now, and they somehow got me in with the group even though I wasn't credentialed there. So I made the decision, I was like, hell yeah, I want to be inside when they break up the camp. So I,
Yeah, it was like,
but I just
Exactly.
wonder
I
though,
mean-
in your reporting though, why wouldn't you be able to write a little bit about your experience, or not yours, but how the pool was controlled? I think that
Oh, yeah,
is
I
part
mean,
of the
the
story. And I
night-
haven't read your story, so I can't say you didn't.
I mean, the night that the weirdness happened with the lottery, I mean, I pushed to get that included up high. So I think it made, you know, we had a front page story, and I think it made actually above the fold, or I mean, before the jump.
That's
That
cool.
aspect that like they had, you know, limited or created a pool. I mean, I think this is a situation that in other countries has sort of been existing for a while. I mean, if you have state-run media in a country, anybody sort of critical of that or trying to do journalism that isn't a part of that is sort of like, there is that being dismissed as, you know, a terrorist or as whatever. I mean, I have a friend from Ethiopia who is a blogger who was just jailed for 20 years. And it's because, you know, and it's that same thing. I mean, if you're not a part of the media voice, you can be labeled as sort of.
Well, other guy was being monitored by Homeland Security, so we're not that far off. I mean, luckily, I don't think I'll be spending 20 years in jail, but I have spent 3 nights in jail on 3 different occasions because I refuse to back down when they tell me you can't take pictures here, even though I'm on a public sidewalk and they have no expectation of privacy. And that's the issue that it happens every day, where you can't take pictures, and moving along, and you might meet the court case, but you're still gonna spend a night in jail.